getting laughs in a big room. Like, are there better feelings than that as someone who's made a show?
No, it's thank God we laughed.
Thank you.
It's spiraling.
It's very, very hard not to, I would say. So, you know, even if you haven't watched this, you can tell this is a show about female friendship in a lot of ways and a lot of other things. But knowing that you guys met when you were in your 20s, much like these characters in the show we see played by Michelle Williams and Jenny Slate, are we seeing any similarities between your lives and the friendship that's at the heart of the series without all the cancer and sex quest stuff? You know, you can share as much of that as you want.
Well, let's get into it.
But as friends who made a show about friends, like how much real life similarities are we seeing here?
I mean, I think we've just known each other for a very long time, so I do think there's like, with any long-term friendship, there's just like a shorthand, there's like a knowledge of who this person is, and
Sometimes too much knowledge.
too much knowledge.
Like with old friends, they can kind of just look at you and like see right through you in a way that's kind of scary, and I feel like we have that a little bit.
Yeah, in a beautiful way. I also, I don't know, I feel like I've talked about there was a day on set where I showed up with like 3 cups of coffee and like 2 like giant versions of this, like, and like a bunch of coats, and Liz just looked at me and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I feel like I'm like the Nikki in this moment. Like, and I don't know, I feel like there are some similarities in terms of that dynamic a little bit, but I think mostly it's just like, our hope is that this just speaks to like all people who have been in long-term friendships, which is like, you know, just a really special, cool thing to have somebody who's known many versions of you throughout your life.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of what is in the show is really based on the podcast and like the amazing friendship between Nikki Boyer and Molly Cochin, and so that was like a huge inspiration for us.
Yeah. So you guys had worked together previously on New Girl, but Liz, you were the sole showrunner on that, and then you had that experience also on The Dropout. So why was this more of a double act? Why did it make sense for you guys to tackle this together as co-showrunners?
It's totally practical.
No, I mean, it made it so much more fun, and like just having a partner. Even now, like even being up here with Kim is great. So yeah, I was in the middle of doing The Dropout, and I knew I couldn't do this right away, and so I emailed Kim, and it was in the middle of COVID, and she was like, "Are you really going to make me listen to a podcast about dying of cancer?" And then she was like, "But it's also all about sex," and I was like, "Well, I'm only human." Yes, I mean, I'm like, I'm a perv, sure. Like, and so she sent it to me, and I listened to it, and I was just like sobbing on my floor. It was like June 2020. It was a dark time for many reasons.
Feelings were high.
Feelings were high, and I found myself having this like emotional release for like kind of like everything. And I was like, oh, I think this is like why like we tell stories, or like why I want to tell stories, is to like, you know, reach people and help people access emotion and like connect. And so I called Liz back and I was like, oh my God, yes, I would do anything to work on this with you. So I continue to be very grateful and honored that she asked.
So that's June 2020. The podcast comes out, I guess, February of that. And then here we are 5 years later, and the show is finally real. And there's many delays. You know, Michelle Williams had a baby. There was a strike and a pandemic and all of these other things. And so you had that long gestation process, which is not, I guess sometimes happens with television, but you can't count on it. So how did you guys use that? Do you feel like you managed to make it work to your advantage, even though I'm sure it was really frustrating in the actual process?
I wish I could say I used it really productively.
We made a whole other show in there too, so that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a kind of wonderful to have time to really think about it, and it was also frustrating sometimes because like you get excited and you want to go, and then. But I mean, there was something about this show that I kind of deep down just knew it was going to happen at some point. It just was one of those things where I was like, I'm gonna get this story out in the world if it's the last thing I do. So I was pretty determined about it. But yeah, I mean, it was nice to have a second to think. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, when we think about New Girl, and like we both, you know, spent like 6-7 years on network television, and just having to like write stuff the night before, and you know, and so it's a really different world now with streaming, you know.
And it was also cool because, like, at some point we were going to have 10 episodes, and then it became 8 episodes, and it was like, it made us really have to, like, give us time to really think about, like, what is essential to this story, because we don't have a lot of time to tell it. And so having that amount of time to keep kind of re-examining it, I think allowed us to make sure we were actually including the pieces that felt really necessary, because there were so many things in the podcast that we, could have explored, or maybe, you always want to do more. But yeah.
I mean, on the granular level of time, like for a limited series to have half-hour episodes, like it's so rare. I didn't even realize until I hit play on the first episode. I mean, obviously, you guys worked on New Girl, that's a half-hour show, but why did that format make sense for this?
I honestly don't know why they greenlit it. I don't know that it makes any sense.
It did not make any sense
from a financial standpoint.
No one's making any money.
They can't do it. They can't take it away now.
No, it's not. It's
You can watch it right now.
Yeah, I was surprised too, but at no point did we want to make it an hour, because what I was actually really excited about by this story was that it was a comedy. It was like, if we're going to go to these places, if we're going to go to these dark places, the fact that we're doing it in the framework of a half-hour episode actually helped kind of like get me to a place where I wanted to explore some of those darker places. So it was, I described it as like, we had like sitcom muscle memory, and we sort of were like attacking these themes, but kind of with the attitude of like, how do we get to the kind of like, how do we find the joy in this? How do we find the kind of absurdity in it? Yeah, so I'm actually really grateful that they kept it at half hour, and I have no idea why.
I think they're grateful too. I think it turned out pretty well. Sorry, can I cut you off?
No, as it goes on though, you'll see it starts to get, we allowed it to expand a little bit more, because I think it was like, okay, like the character starts sort of, the character is expanding, the whole world seems like it's kind of like growing in the show, and it was cool that FX was allowing us to like be a little bit looser with the time as the episodes went on.
I mean, when you hear a show is adapted from a podcast, you're like, oh, okay, so the first episode of the podcast can become the show. And like, I listened to the first episode of the podcast, which is really nothing at all, like anything on the show. Like, there's a whole story about a massage that I don't think ever comes up on the show. So you guys had this basic story of this friendship, and obviously, Molly's story has this set ending, but the structure is really, I imagine, a really big challenge of figuring out how to make that work into an actual narrative. And I guess that's not really a question, but how did you guys really break it down, what you had on the podcast? It seems like really built something totally new.
Yeah, it's sort of deceptive, like when you sign up to adapt a podcast, it's like, oh, it's already an episode. It's like my work's done for me, and
like this will take us. I was like, if you and I just go away for like a week, we could like bang this out and like turn it in
5 years later. Yeah. But yeah, I think the podcast is two women talking about things that have happened after the fact. So we knew that we had to tell the story in real time, because time is such an important part of the story. So we had so many conversations about just like, how are we going to tell Molly's story, which is this very internal, the Michelle Williams character, this kind of internal emotional journey through her own experience while she's having sex, like how do we show that on screen? And one bad idea that we had was like a magic school bus style thing where we were like fully inside of her body.
They responded to that.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe this is an opportunity.
Maybe they'll give us one more episode. Here, do it. No, the blood cells look like life rafts. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, so it was a lot of just like bad ideas, lots of back and forth, like how do we do this, and also keep the friendship, like keep that sense of like how much these two women love each other, but still feel like we're moving forward. I think the other big decision we made was she's experienced some sexual trauma in her past, and we decided to not save that till later. Like, we didn't want that to be what everything was building up to, like the reveal of the trauma. We wanted to put it at the beginning and sort of talk about let the show be about her healing from it as opposed to revealing it as the sort of answer for everything. That was a big conversation that we had, and so then we kind of worked from that place.
Oh, and we also we knew that we wanted to really tell the story of a caretaker as well as the story of the person being taken care of, and so we knew that we were gonna, like Liz is saying, really center this story on the love story between these two best friends. And also we would need to really flesh out the character of Nikki, because on the podcast, her role is to ask questions and to react, but we were very interested in who is the person, what's going on in her life while she's taking care of her friend. What is she sacrificing? What is she going through in order to do this? What does that look like? Because I think sadly cancer impacts so many people's lives, but also being a caretaker is something that most people have done at some point and can understand, and we really wanted to depict that experience as well. We thought that would also be really powerful and resonate with audiences.